There's a fire going in front of me right now, throwing more light than heat the way a fire does when the wind won't sit still. I've got dry wood stacked to my left, more than I'll burn through the night, and I built the blaze up big and bright the way any sensible man does when the cold comes down hard. Roaring flames, a wall of orange you could read a book by. And I'll tell you something that took me a long time and a couple of bad nights to learn. That big roaring fire, the beautiful one, the one that looks like safety itself, the one every book and every movie tells you to build when the temperature drops and your teeth start knocking together, that fire has frozen more men to death than any storm ever blew in off the ridge. I know exactly how that lands on the ear. Sounds like nonsense. Sounds backward. A big fire freezing a man. But you stay with me here, because this is the truest thing I can hand you, and it's a thing the survival books have been getting wrong so long, they don't even know they're wrong anymore. That big fire will light up your camp and warm the front of your body and make you feel like a king for about an hour. And then it will lie to you. It'll burn through your whole woodpile before the night's even half spent, and it'll pull the heat right out of your own body while it's at it. And it'll leave you sitting in the dark on frozen ground with your fuel gone and the worst of the cold still hours away. It does one thing well, that big fire. It comforts you right up until the moment it kills you. Nobody teaches the other way anymore, the old way. The way that keeps a man breathing through a night that had put a lesser fire out and a lesser man under. And the fix? Same as always with these old things. Doesn't cost a dime. It's free as the dirt under your boots. In fact, the fix is the part everybody scrapes away and throws out. The part the survival manuals tell you to clear off before you even strike a spark. So keep listening, because once you understand this, you'll never build a fire the same way again. And you'll look at every campfire scene in every movie and know they'd have all been dead by morning. Let me tell you who I am first, so you know I'm not reading this off a card. I've spent winters in country where a mistake with fire isn't a bad night, it's the last night. I've slept out at temperatures that turn your breath to frost on your collar and freeze your bootlaces stiff as sticks. I've done it right, and I've done it wrong. And the wrong times are the ones that taught me. Because a man doesn't truly learn a thing about cold until the cold has had its hands around his throat at least once. The men who taught me the right way didn't get it from any book either. They got it the way all the hard knowledge gets got, which is by watching somebody they knew do it the wrong way and not come home. The first thing they broke me of was the thing you probably believe right now. The thing everybody believes. That the size of your fire is the measure of your warmth. Big fire, warm man. Small fire, cold man. It's about the most natural thing in the world to think, and standing in front of a bonfire on a summer evening, it even feels true. But out in the deep cold, out where it counts, that belief is exactly the thing that gets a man killed. Because a fire doesn't keep you alive by how big it is. A fire keeps you alive by how long it lasts and by how you sit yourself against it. And a big fire fails on both counts at the very moment you need it most. Hold on to something for me now, a little riddle I'm going to leave sitting here and not answer till later. Because it's the whole spine of what I'm telling you. The men who died of this weren't men without fire. That's the thing. They had fire. They had flame right there in front of them, crackling and bright, when the end came for them. I want you to sit with that. How a warm man freezes. How a man with a fire burning right at his feet ends up stiff and gone by morning while the coals are still glowing. That's not a story about a man who couldn't make fire. That's a story about a man who made too much of it. I'll show you exactly how that happens, how a warm man freezes, but not yet. Keep it in the back of your mind, because it matters more than anything else I'll say tonight. Before any of that makes sense, you've got to understand what a fire actually is and what it actually does. Because the trouble starts with a plain misunderstanding about heat itself. When you stand in front of that big roaring blaze, you feel the heat on your skin, on your face, on the front of your legs. And it feels like the fire is warming you. But it isn't. Not really. Not in the way that keeps you alive. That heat you feel on your face is radiant heat. And radiant heat travels in a straight line. And it only touches what it can see. So the front of you cooks while the back of you freezes. And you spin yourself around like a hog on a spit trying to warm all your sides. And the whole time, the ground under you, the frozen ground, is pulling heat out of your body faster than that fire can put it back in. That's the first piece of it, and it's the piece the books skip. They tell you to build a fire, and they tell you to build it big, and they never once tell you that the cold coming up through the earth beneath you will kill you deader than the cold in the air, and no size of fire in front of you will stop it. The ground is a thief. The frozen ground is the patientest, quietest thief there is, and it works on you all night long while your eyes are on the pretty flames. A man can freeze from the bottom up, with his face flushed red from the fire, and that's not a thing you'll read in most books. But it's a thing every old hand knew in his bones. Now here's where I need you to lean in, because if this next part doesn't land, then nothing else I say will do you any good at all. Most people, deep down, carry the notion that fire is about flame, that the flame is the thing. The bigger the flame, the better the fire. And out here, in the cold that matters, that is dead wrong. Flame is the showy part. Flame is the part that burns your wood the fastest and gives you the least in return. It's coals that keep a man alive, not flame. It's the deep red bed of embers, the part with no drama to it at all, the part that just sits there glowing low and steady and throwing heat for hours. A big flame is a fire spending your fuel all at once, in a hurry, showing off. A bed of coals is a fire that's learned patience, and the cold night is long, and patience is the only thing that gets you across it. Sit with this next part, because it tells you who really understood the cold, and who only thought they did. The native people of the far north, the people who'd wintered on that land 1,000 winters running before any wagon ever rolled in. They didn't build big fires. That surprises folks. You'd think the people in the coldest country on earth would build the biggest fires of anyone. They didn't. They built small ones, careful ones. And more than that, they built shelters that held the heat of a single small flame, or even just a lamp, a little dish of burning fat. And they slept warm through nights that would kill a strong man in the open beside a bonfire. They understood the thing that the newcomers didn't. They understood that the enemy wasn't the cold in front of you. The enemy was the heat leaving you. And you don't fight that with a bigger fire. You fight it by not letting the heat go in the first place. The ones who died were the newcomers, the trappers and the prospectors and the lost travelers who came into that country carrying the idea of fire they'd grown up with, the idea of a good big blaze and a stone hearth and a warm house. And they tried to make that same fire out in the open on the snow. And it failed them, because it was never built for that. They copied the fire and skipped the knowing. Same as always, same as it ever goes. That one missing piece, that understanding of what heat is and where it goes, that's the whole difference between the man who walks out in spring and the man they find in the thaw. So here's the trick, and I'll hand it to you in layers, the same as it was handed to me, because dumping it all out at once would rob it of its weight. The first layer turns your whole head around. You do not build your fire to warm the air. You build your fire and everything around your fire to keep the heat that's already in your body from leaving it. That's the flip. Your body is the fire that matters. Your body is throwing off heat right now, good heat, 98 degrees of it, and the whole game out in the cold is not letting that heat run off into the night. The fire you build is there to help you hold your own heat and add a little to it, not to become your heat. The man who understands that builds a small fire and lives. The man who doesn't builds a bonfire and dies warm-faced and cold-hearted. I'll leave that first layer sitting there and pick the rest up in a moment, because the second layer is the one nearly everybody alive today gets exactly backward, and it's the part they tell you to throw away. The part they tell you to clear away. Come back to that fire with me. You've got it in your head now that the job isn't to heat the whole cold world, it's to keep your own heat from bleeding out into the dark. Good. Now here's the second layer, and it's the one that made me shake my head the first time I understood how backward we've got it. Every survival book, every scout manual, every bit of advice you've ever gotten about building a fire tells you the same first step. Clear the ground. Scrape it down. Get all the leaves and the pine needles and the duff and the dry grass out of the way. Sweep it down to bare dirt or bare rock so your fire won't spread. And there's sense in that. In summer, in dry country, when a stray spark can run through dead grass and set a whole hillside roaring. I'll not tell you that's wrong when the woods are dry, but in the deep cold, in the snow, in the winter when there's no fire danger at all because everything's frozen and wet, that habit, that scraping away of everything soft down to the cold, hard ground, that's a habit that'll kill you. Because that soft stuff you're sweeping away, that layer of dead leaves and needles and dry grass and moss, that's the very thing that would have saved your life. That's your insulation. That's your bed. That's the barrier between your warm body and the thieving frozen ground I told you about. The old hands didn't scrape the ground bare and lie down on it. They did the opposite. They piled it up. They gathered every armful of dry leaves and pine boughs and grass and dead bracken they could find, and they made a thick, deep mattress of it, a foot deep if they could manage it, and they lay on top of that. And it held their body heat, and it kept the cold ground from drinking them dry through the night. The thing the book tells you to throw in the bushes is the thing that stands between you and freezing from the bottom up. Same as the marrow and the organs, same as it always is. The treasure was in the pile you were told to discard. And it goes further than just your bed. That green wood, those pine boughs, the stuff a book might tell you to pass over because it won't burn clean, that's your wall and your roof. A wall of green boughs behind your fire and behind your back does two things at once, and both of them are the whole game. It stops the wind from stealing your heat, and it catches the radiant heat off your fire. The heat that'd otherwise fly off into the empty night and be lost, and it throws it back at you. A reflector, they call it. You build your fire, and behind the fire, you build a wall of logs or stone or packed snow or green boughs, and that wall bounces the heat back. And then you sit yourself between the fire and another wall behind you, and now you're not warming one side of your body while the other side freezes. Now you're in a pocket of caught heat, warmed front and back, using a fire a quarter the size of the bonfire that'd have killed you. Now the third layer, and this one feels like cheating once you know it. The third layer is that you don't build one fire. Not a big one, not a small one, not any single fire out in the open. You build your fire long and narrow, and you sleep alongside the whole length of it. The long fire, some call it. Instead of a round blaze you huddle in front of and roast one side against, you lay a fire out in a line as long as your body, and you bed down beside it, and the warmth comes at you all along your length, not just at one hot point. And here's the cheating part, the part that made me laugh out loud the first time an old-timer showed me. You lay two big logs side by side, close together, and you build your little fire down in the crack between them, and those two logs feed the fire slow and steady all night long, burning inward toward each other hour after hour, so you don't have to wake and feed it every 20 minutes like you would a hungry bonfire. The fire tends itself. 2 logs and a match and a bed of coals down in the seam, and it'll burn low and warm from dark till dawn while you sleep. That's the self-feeding fire, and no bonfire ever built could do what that quiet little thing does. The people who dig up the old ways will tell you men were sleeping between logs and behind reflectors and on beds of piled boughs for longer than anybody's been writing anything down. This isn't some clever new dodge. It's the oldest cold weather knowledge there is. Older than the wheel. Older than writing. The knowing that kept our own ancient kin alive through ice ages we can't even picture. And we traded it for a picture in a book of a happy family around a big round campfire, which is a fine picture and a fine way to spend a warm summer evening and a fine way to die on a cold winter one. Now the fourth layer, and this is the one nobody sees coming. The one that sounds like pure madness until it clicks into place. When the cold gets its very worst, when the night turns truly deadly, you make your fire smaller. Smaller. I'll say it again because everything in you is fighting it. When the cold is at its absolute meanest, you do not build the fire up. You bring it down, and you bring yourself in close, and you shrink your whole world down to the smallest, warmest pocket you can make. Because a big fire out in a killing cold is just a faster way to burn through the only fuel you've got. And once that fuel is gone in the black hours before dawn, you've got nothing at all. The man who feeds a monster fire all evening is the man who's out of wood at 3 a.m, when the cold bites hardest and the dawn is still 3 hours off. And that starving for warmth instinct, that instinct that tells you to pile on more wood and build it bigger when you start to shiver, that's the very instinct that empties your woodpile and kills you before sunup. Now circle back to that riddle I asked you to hold, how a warm man freezes. Here's the whole of it laid out plain. That man had a fire, a big, beautiful, roaring fire. And he built it in the evening when the cold first came on, and he still had the strength and the wood to build it big. And it warmed his face, and it made him feel safe, and it burned through his whole stack of wood by midnight. And he'd scraped the ground bare underneath himself the way the book said, so the frozen earth was drinking the heat out of his backside the whole night through. And he had no wall behind him, so half the fire's heat and all his own body heat flew off into the dark. So there he sat, warm-faced and content, while 3 things killed him at once. The ground stole his heat from below. The open night stole his heat from behind. And the fire he loved so much ate his fuel so fast that when the deep cold of the small hours came, the hour when a body's own fire burns lowest, he had nothing left to feed the flames. And so the fire went down to coals, and then to ash. And the man who'd been warm at midnight was gone by the gray of dawn, stiff on the cold ground, with an empty woodpile beside him, and a look on his face like he couldn't understand what had gone wrong. That's how a warm man freezes, not for want of fire, for want of knowing. I won't spin you a tale, so let me hand you the one hard fact that proves this isn't just campfire talk. The United States Army, in the cold weather survival guidance it's put down in writing for its own soldiers, teaches the exact opposite of the big fire instinct, and it always has. It teaches insulation from the ground first, before anything, because the manuals state plainly that a man loses heat to the cold earth faster than he loses it to cold air, and that a soldier must put a barrier of boughs or brush or whatever he's got between his body and the ground, or he'll lose the fight, no matter how good his fire is. It teaches the reflector wall. It teaches the small, controlled fire over the large one, because a small fire is easier to feed through a long night and doesn't burn a man out of fuel. When the Army writes down how to keep its own soldiers from freezing, and it writes down small fire, ground insulation, reflected heat, and it never once writes down build it big, you can take that straight to the bank. The instinct they're training out of those men is the very instinct the books and movies trained into the rest of us. Who kept the knowing? and who let it go. So why doesn't everybody know this? Why is the picture in every child's head a great big roaring campfire, when the great big roaring campfire is the thing that'd kill them? And the answer's the same quiet answer as always. And it's got nothing to do with any conspiracy. It's got to do with need. A piece of hard knowledge only stays alive as long as folks actually need it to stay alive. The day the wood stove came into the cabin, the day the furnace came into the house, the day a man could turn a knob and have heat without ever once needing to know how to keep his own body's heat from bleeding into a winter night, that was the day this knowing started to die. Nobody keeps a rule sharp that they'll never have to use. The knowing didn't get taken from us. We set it down because we didn't need to carry it anymore. And then a couple of generations went by, and nobody could even remember where we'd set it. And then it got worse, the way it always seems to get worse. Because once the true knowing was gone, something had to fill the empty space. And what filled it was the pretty picture. The campfire on the postcard. The bonfire in the movie, where the hero sits warm and content in the firelight. The survival show where the fella builds a blaze you could signal a plane with. That big, beautiful fire got sold to us as the very image of warmth and safety. And it's exactly backward. And it's backward because the big fire looks good, and the small, smart fire looks like nothing at all. There's no drama in a man sleeping quiet between two logs behind a wall of boughs. There's no picture worth selling in a low bed of coals. The thing that keeps you alive doesn't photograph well, and the thing that kills you looks like a Christmas card. So the Christmas card is what got handed down, and the knowing that a man's own body is the fire that matters, and the whole job is holding on to that heat, that got left out because it doesn't sell a thing, and it doesn't look like much. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me, because I'd rather you trust me than be dazzled by me. This isn't going to happen to most of you. You're not going to freeze to death beside a bonfire this winter, not with a furnace humming and a roof over your head and a town down the road. To die of this, you'd have to be caught out, truly caught out, stranded or lost or broke down, miles from anywhere on the coldest night of the year, the way a stranded hunter or a wandered hiker or a man whose truck quit on a back road might end up. Not the way you're sitting comfortable right now. I won't tell you it's coming for you, but I'll tell you this, same as I always do, that every man it ever came for was sitting comfortable and sure, right up until the hour it wasn't comfortable anymore. And by then, the knowing you needed was a knowing you'd never bothered to carry. So here's how you carry it. Not as fear, but as a plain way of doing things. The whole system the old hands lived by. First, before you ever strike a spark, you get yourself off the ground. You pile up boughs or leaves or grass or brush, thick and deep, and you make your bed on top of that, because the ground is the thief that works all night. Second, you build small, not big. A small fire lasts, and a small fire is enough when you've done everything else right. Third, you build a wall. Behind the fire and behind your own back, a reflector of logs or stone or snow or green boughs to catch the heat that'd otherwise fly off into the dark and throw it back where it belongs. Fourth, you build it long and lay beside it. Or you build it down in the seam between two big logs so it feeds itself slow while you sleep. And last, when the cold turns its very worst, you don't panic and pile on wood. You bring the fire down and yourself in close, and you make your world small and warm, and you ride it out till dawn. None of it costs a thing, and that's the part I love the most. The bed of boughs is free. The reflector wall is free. The knowing that heat leaves you through the ground and off your back and out into the night, that's free too. Free as the snow coming down. and it was sitting in the pile of stuff the books told you to sweep away and throw in the bushes. The whole secret was in the discard the entire time, same as always. Maybe that's the real lesson, the one bigger than fires and bigger than winter. Those men didn't die because the cold was cruel. The cold was only ever just the cold. They died because they were certain. Certain that big fire meant warm man. Certain the flame was the thing. Certain they already knew what fire was, when they didn't know the first true thing about it. The cold never kills the humble man half so fast as it kills the sure one. The old hands feared their own certainty worse than they ever feared the winter. And that's the thing I'd hand you before any trick about logs and boughs. So here's the whole of it. Small enough to carry and free as the ground you stand on. Get off the earth before you do anything else. Build it small, not big. Put a wall at your back and behind the flame. Make it long or make it feed itself. And when the worst comes, go smaller and closer, not bigger. Do that much, and the country can throw its meanest, blackest, coldest night straight at you, and you'll still be there to see the sun come up. The people who wintered this land with a knife in their two hands knew things we're only now starting to remember. And a piece of that knowing damn near went into the frozen ground with them. And I won't stand by and watch the last of it go. So tell me, down in the comments, what's the one thing about keeping warm or making do in the cold that your grandparents knew and did without ever thinking twice? The kind of thing the rest of us have plain forgotten. Because I want to hear it. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that turns everything you've been told clean on its head. An old rule about the cold itself. About the moment out in the winter when you finally start to feel warm and comfortable and drowsy and good. And why that warm, comfortable feeling in the deep cold is very often the last feeling a man ever gets to have. I'll show you what it really means, and what the old hands did the second they felt it coming on. Until then, take care of your fire, and build it small, because the fire that saves you is never the one that impresses you.